Canyon claims it has the fastest bike in the World Tour Peloton now with the new 4th generation Aeroad, which has not one, but 2 sets of adjustable dropouts. The bike comes with these classic drops, which have 3 different widths, and then you can buy these aero drops, which, you guessed it, are narrower and aero-er, and can save 14 watts at 45 kilometers an hour, Canyon claims. You know, because we're all rolling around here at 30 miles an hour, right? In this video, I'll tell you more about Canyon's claims, what I like, what I love, and what drives me bananas about some elements of this highly engineered Canyon machine. Like all my reviews, heck no, this is not paid for by Canyon. Yes, I realize this is YouTube and a lot of reviews are sponsored by the company in question. That's not how I roll. I've been working in cycling media since the turn of the century, and because of that, I have some good relationships with folks. So I'm able to borrow bikes for a few weeks, sometimes a few months, do reviews for you here on YouTube, and then send the bikes back. If you'd like to know more about how I make money doing this, you can click that link above and also put a link in the description below. The short answer is I am supported by sponsors, not bike companies. But let's get into it. Hit that subscribe button and we'll talk more about what Canyon has to say about this bike, what I have to say about this bike after riding it for a while, after talking to Canyon's engineering team, and after talking to various top-level professionals who have raced various iterations of this bike for more than a decade now. You can use the table of contents below to jump around if you like. The Canyon Aeroad goes back to 2010. Alexander Kristoff won Milan-San Remo on it in 2014. I was in Belgium when he won the Tour of Flanders in 2015. I shot his bike then. It was notable at the time, winning a cobbled race on an aero bike. I also shot his bike again in 2016. It's funny looking back at that. The bike was built up as a SRAM bike, but using Shimano brakes because the frame required direct mount braking. Rim brakes, people, remember that? Kristoff's bikes in those years had 130 length stems. Remember that little factoid, we'll come back to it. This bike has since been raced in various iterations by some of the world's best. Mathieu van der Poel won Flanders multiple times, won Paris-Roubaix multiple times. Annemiek van Vleuten won Tour de France Femmes, and just about everything else she signed up for on various iterations of this Aeroad. If you're thinking, yeah, pro racing, whatever, I don't care, you may say that, but you do. I think that's part of what has enabled Canyon as a consumer direct brand to capture some of the fire, some of the hotness, is because it does sponsor top level athletes. Many other brands have gone the consumer direct route in the past where price is the compelling argument, but without that association with what the fast folks in the pro Peloton are doing, it's a lot harder to make the brand cool. Lucas Burr, Canyon's design engineer, said the target customer for this bike was their pro athlete, which is a funny thing to say. Pro athletes are terrible customers. They're not buying these things, but I take their point. They wanted to make the best race bike, the fastest race bike that they could. Also, a goal for this bike, Canyon said, was to make it simpler for mechanics. I hear these claims and I want to challenge them a bit, piece by piece. As for making the fastest bike, yes, absolutely. Who doesn't want that? Pro racers want that. Recreational riders love the idea of the fastest bike. They claim that testing this bike against others like the Cervelo without round bottles notably, this is now the fastest bike in the Peloton. They did test with a pedaling mannequin, which makes sense. Frame shaping plays a role. There's changes up here, changes back here. Up front, thinner. Thinner at the head tube, a little bit deeper, thinner and deeper fork legs. You can tell there's a massively deep section here. At the back, a little bit thinner for a little bit more comfort. Riding this, it felt not as brutally rigid as like a Noah Fast from Ridley, but not quite as plush as, say, the new Trek Madone. But the biggest beast, of course, of the aero puzzle is you, and what you're doing with your body, particularly the front of your body, makes a huge impact on drag. So being able to have bars that get narrower and thus aero-er, that's a real thing. Again, their claim with these aero drops, which go as skinny as 35 center to center at the top, 35 centimeters, 14 watt savings at 45 kilometers an hour over the classic straight up and down drops. So you've got a fair amount of adjustment, right? Both in terms of the 3 stock widths and then being able to purchase the aero drops, have some more adjustment there. In terms of your stack, you've now got 20 mil of reduction. The stem is like a new take on the old school quill, and there are no spacers required above. You can just remove these spacers and drop it down. Notably missing, though, is, you guessed it, the stem adjustment. The stem length is what it is. And here's where I take a good-natured jab at Canyon, saying the pro athlete is their target customer, because remember, Christoph with his 130 stem, this is a stock piece and you'd have to buy a whole new cockpit front end and then either do the work yourself or pay someone to install it in order to get a different length. And while this is part of fit, so is this. How much stock, pun intended, you put on the small adjustment of fit in terms of your stem length, I can't tell you how important that is. For me, I typically get a 56 bike, which this medium is roughly 56, and then I like to have a 120 stem. This is a medium with a 100 stem. So that is an annoyance. Yes, I could go up a larger size, but then I've got, in my mind, way too little seat posts, and then also some of the component sizes change. Typically when you go from a medium to a large, you're looking at going from 172.5 to 175 cranks, and then the bars get a little wider, etc. So my preference is a 56 bike with a 120 stem. So while it is slick that you can adjust the bar width in a bunch of different ways, can adjust the stem length. This is the absolute top end model. There's a whole range, of course. I'll talk more about those prices at the end. This bike, built up as such, dressed in SRAM Red Axis, which is a fantastic group, zips 454 NSW wheels, weighs, let's see here, 15.67 pounds. The Madone that I just rode, same size, but with a longer stem, thank you, Trek, is 15.5 pounds. So for aero race bikes, yes, they're light, and yes, for these prices, they absolutely should be in these competitive weights. Let's talk more about the cockpit, the pros and the cons, the highs and the lows. A cool thing is that you are able to get 3 effective widths without having to suffer the brain damage of disconnecting the brake hoses, uninstalling, reinstalling an integrated bar, and then reconnecting everything. Because the hoses, while they do run up through the stem, they do not run in the drops, they just run underneath. So when you loosen the 2 bolts under each drop, you can move the drop and then even take it all the way out, pull the shifter off, and switch drops if that's something you choose to do. So yes, I hear you're thinking, hey, if I just had a standard bar stem, I could do all this and more and change the stem length. Yes, you absolutely could. But we're operating within the confines of a highly aerodynamic machine, the fastest bike in the World Tour. So as far as integrated cockpits go, that's kind of a cool thing. Am I worried about the safety of the system? Short answer, no. You obviously have a lot of bolts elsewhere on your bike, and as long as everything is tight, you should not have an issue. I and many other journalists certainly wrote about one of those Canyon Aeroad bikes where the bar broke. That was not related to what's going on here. Another new thing, at least new for the Aeroad with this cockpit, is the gear groove. Whereas the outgoing Aeroad had bolts underneath for a spoon mount style computer mount, this has the same mechanism that the Grail gravel bike does, in that you can put a computer mount, if it's the Canyon computer mount, which is in stock now. I know I got a lot of aggravated messages from many of you when I reviewed the Grail, and you said, yeah, that's all fine and good, but you can't get a computer mount. The computer mount is in stock. So you can put that on. You can put the Aero cockpit on there, and there's a phone mount as well. So to my eyes, it's not as clean looking as the older one, when it was just a clean, flat surface. But Canyon has opted for the versatility of this gear groove system. Speaking of annoyances, a couple other minor things. The cages, they don't come stock on the bike, but Canyon sent them. Work great as long as you've got a Canyon bottle, which fits snugly. If you use any other bottle, it doesn't fit. And to me, this is a case of Canyon over-engineering something that worked perfectly well. The round bottles also bring up an interesting thing with such a highly aerodynamic package when considering the Trek Madone, where the bottles are also a pain in the butt in a whole different way, in that they're completely impractical. You can't just open the thing, set it on the counter and fill it, because they're not round, they're not flat bottomed. But those bottles are very much designed as part of the package, because it turns out many of us ride bicycles with water bottles. So I think it's a little telling that Canyon did not test with bottles at all. My last gripe is something that did come on the bike, which is the saddle is a nice design, but it's a 130 width instead of 143, 145, which is what I like. So again, if you were buying from a bike shop, wouldn't be a big deal at all. They would swap it out there for you right on the floor before you rode the thing out. Or you could sit on the thing to know if it fits you or not before you purchase the thing. So a drawback to a consumer direct bike is that you get what you get, and as my kids were taught in school, you don't throw a fit. Maybe you do throw a fit. I kind of throw a fit about the seat. Geometry, same as the Canyon Ultimate, comes in 7 sizes, relatively tried and true there. The bike comes with 28 mil tires, and there's clearance for 32. Even on aero bikes, we're seeing tires get ever wider. Small details I dig, starting with the aesthetics. Sparkle paint job is cool. The frame does not have unsightly axle holes on the drive side, which I think looks slick. Harder to see, but perhaps more important, underneath the fork there are little bumpers, so when you take the front wheel off and set the bike down, you're not scratching up the expensive, precious carbon. And the humble axle lever, something many brands forgo, especially on aero bikes, trying to get all the marginal gains, is a twofer. One, you can take your axles out. Also, there's a Torx 25 in here, which works on most all of the bolts, including on the saddle. You've got a 2-bolt system. This for your fore and aft, and then under the saddlebag is the tilt. It's like 12 Newton meters on that one. You have to really crank it down, so maybe a little bit more than this guy could do. But yeah, it's nice to have a single tool, a single dual tool that does almost everything. So that's a cool thing in my mind. Also, a hidden thing, a titanium bearing seat with a ceramic hybrid bearing inside with a good seal, trying to prevent any ingress when many of us are power washing our bikes. I appreciate the Canyon engineer's honesty, saying that, yeah, we're not supposed to power wash our bike, but we all do it. So building in a little water deflection system, I think is a cool thing. Other bits you can't see, we'll have to take Canyon's word for. They said the inside of the frame is now nearly as smooth as the outside, thanks to new manufacturing processes. I'm not gonna go all ham-beanie on this and saw the frame apart. I have inadvertently taken a few frames apart through crashes over the years, and some are relatively rough. Okay, now let's talk about what this thing is like to ride and to work on. In a nutshell, it's a hoot, it's fun. Aero road bikes may not be the most practical thing in the world. Canyon's talking about, pro racers being their target customer. Pro racers aren't buying them, but enthusiasts are, and fast bikes, for many of us, are fun bikes. First ride on this guy, took it on a 100-mile loop up into the mountains here on something called the Peak-to-Peak Highway, which is a beautiful ride and something I recommend folks doing if you are able to get the chance to come ride in Colorado. A lot of climbing, a lot of rolling flats in the mountains, and then some screaming descents. I think my peak speed was something like 58, 59 miles an hour, and I felt confident on this bike. Some of that could be attributed to, 28 mil rubber at 65 PSI, and some of it's just stable geometry. Yeah, it's not slacked out. It's a steep road race bike, but it did not feel unsafe at speed. I appreciate the group quite a bit. SRAM's latest and greatest, the 12-speed red Axis, for many reasons. Starting with the shape of the hoods. I love these things. That's one thing I really appreciate about electronic shifting, is it just clears up more room for your hands. I just love the feel of the hoods. I love the extra length. I love the fact that there are buttons on them now. It's something that Shimano had a monopoly on for a while. You can program these to drive your computer, or as the bike came set, you can shift with them also. So when you're in the praying mantis position, you can pew pew with the thumbs as well as shifting out here. So love this new SRAM group. Another thing I appreciate about the Axis ecosystem in general is the data, in that, and when you do rides like that first ride I did with the Wahoo computer, all the shift data, provided that you connect the drivetrain to the head unit, all that goes into the SRAM Axis site, and then you can access that later to see how much time you're spending in different gears. So I think that's a helpful exercise to see if you need more gear or less gear, or if you're doing just fine with what you have. You can see how much time is spent in the small ring and the big ring and all the cogs, and you can drill in and see like what your average power is in each gear. So that's a cool thing. Some other rides I did on this fast group rides in Boulder, there's something called Wednesday Morning Velo. Put my camera on the back of Simon's bike, thanks Simon. And for that, the relative flatland gear, I was certainly maxed out on some of the steeper, climbs approaching 10% or so. Was definitely looking for more gear. It's funny how our perception, at least my perception of what gearing is, has changed over the years. So this has got a 35 small ring and a 28 in the back. Point is, two things. One, I think this cassette in modern terms skews towards flatland speed. And two, if you haven't checked out the SRAM Axis site for your own gearing and you've got an Axis bike, do so. I love that the bike comes with a power meter. Quark is a quality meter and nice and cleanly integrated visually. For the bike, I love how it feels. It's not the plushest ride, absolutely, but doesn't beat you up at all. Plenty of BB stiffness for my humble efforts. All in all, I think it's a great package. I would love to get a wider saddle. I yapped on that a bit. I would love to get a slightly longer stem. And if I were the design engineer, I think I would go for a smooth top as opposed to this gear groove, but turns out I'm not a Canyon employee and they didn't ask me my thoughts on this. Another potential integrated thing, if you like, Canyon's taillight. You can put it on a couple ways. One, rubber straps that will go on any seat post, or if you've got a Canyon bike, you can bolt on the little clip-on adjustment. I had it on there, but I didn't like how it looked for the video, so I took the thing off. But that's an option. Something we're seeing from other brands, like I've got a BMC light here, similar size, that slides down into the frame there at the collar. Trek Madone, I was testing, they sent a Carback, their answer to the Garmin Varia radar, which is also light, and this clips onto the saddle. So lots of bike brands playing around with integration of different things. As far as which drop style I prefer, I actually like this more than I thought. It's pretty dramatic visually, as you can see, 19-degree flare, and it's a much shorter drop. This is 120, the Classic is 130. The Classic has 0 flare. This feels more normal instantly just because I've been riding this shape for 1,000 years. This is surprisingly comfortable. You know, definitely narrower, aero-er, and more conducive to the praying mantis position. I think it's fun to be able to change options, and that's something I recommend people doing, not necessarily at this level, but if you're trying to figure out what is a good fit for you, playing with different handlebars is a good way to figure that out. I realize this is a very expensive way to go, but if you're in a bike shop, being able to try on different bars or maybe borrow your buddy's bike that has slightly different bars, that is a way to make a bike feel quite different. Is a narrower bar, just adjusting the angle of the bar, something you can't do on an integrated bar, but a normal bar is something you can do, and adjusting the angle of the hoods. That's absolutely something I recommend you do if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable. Before you wrap the tape, or if you've got tape on there, take it off, and then peel the hood back and take your 5mm, loosen it up, and just try a couple different angles and see what feels good. What you're seeing on the television, watching the Tour de France, might not be the best situation for you, but trying different options and seeing what feels good, it's always a great way to go. Stock models and prices. Of course, there's a whole range. Different frame materials and then different build options. Curiously, while Canyon remains very competitive on the top end, the less expensive options really aren't that much cheaper than some of the bike shop brands. So this guy, top of the range CFR frame, dressed as such in SRAM red axis, is $10,500, about the same in euros. Dressed in Shimano Dura-Ace Di2, $10K. Take a step down, the CF SLX 8 frame, 6,500 euros, $6,600 with Shimano Ultegra Di2. With SRAM Force axis, it's about $7,000 and euros. Then you get to the CF SLX 7 model, Shimano 105 Di2, is 5,600 bucks in the US. It's a lot cheaper in Europe, 4,800 euros. The SRAM Rival Axis bike is 4,200 euros, but 5,600 bucks. Compare that to, say, the Trek Madone Rival Axis, 6K. So yeah, it's a little bit cheaper, but not substantially cheaper the way the top-end bikes are. As always, I have no idea what market you're in, what sales you're looking at, so I can't say that this is absolutely a better deal than that because prices are fluctuating all the time. But curious that the published prices out of the gate, that Canyon isn't super cheap on the quote-unquote entry-level models. In sum, 4th generation Canyon Aeroad Aero road race bike. It's a good bike to ride. I quite enjoyed it. I appreciate, as strange as it may seem, I appreciate being able to adjust the width of the bars. It was fun to be able to try different shapes of the bars without having to endure the brain damage of disconnecting everything and rebuilding the entire bike, but just doing a relatively simple process of removing a couple bolts, removing the lever, redoing that, and then wrapping up the tape again. I wish there was an easily simple way to change the stem length. That, for me, is the one thing that prevents me from saying, yes, this bike is 100% awesome, you should go do it. What I will say is this is an excellent bike. It's a good price, as always, for Canyon, especially on the top end, but just make sure, measure 4 times by once if you're gonna buy, to make sure that your fit fits this bike. And if it does, this is a pretty darn good option. As always, I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you subscribing. And whether you're liking your bars narrow or wide, or you're old school and you like a separate bar and stem, get out there and enjoy the ride.